This is Brooke Wanser. I'm the reporter for the Franklin homepage, and I'm here today with J. Edward Campbell, who is a candidate for Alderman. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Alderman?
Yes, thanks for having me. J. Edward Campbell, I've lived in the city of Franklin since 1976. I moved here from Memphis. I was born and raised in Memphis and transferred here with a job in 1976. I became intentionally involved in the community through volunteer activities, things like that. Several years ago, I became involved with some things with the city of Franklin. Last year, I served as the chairman of the Housing Commission, which is made up of citizens of various occupations within the city. And this year, I serve on that commission as well as a member. I think the thing about me is intentional involvement. And as I've watched Franklin grow and develop, it's still the charming small town that it always was, but we're starting to have big city problems that are creeping up. So we need to have careful planned growth, careful planning moving into the future.
So, as a challenger for Ward 1, what knowledge or expertise do you bring to the field that you feel is not already there?
I am a realtor, a broker. I work with my wife, Brenda Campbell. We do not own our own company. We work for Synergy Realty Network in Cool Springs. So I hear from people moving into the area things that are of questions and concerns to them about the city and about growth and about traffic and about schools and various things like that. As I have been campaigning, what I'm hearing in Ward 1 is we want a representative on the board that will represent us as citizens, as residents, as well as represent the commercial and the retail and the development. I think citizens are feeling like they're not in touch with their alderman. A lot of them have never met the current alderman. They don't know who the current alderman is. They are thanking me for knocking on their doors. I'm giving out my email address. I'm giving out my website. I'm giving out my cell phone and telling them to contact me, and they're contacting me back with questions and concerns. So I think I bring to the table that I would be available by phone or by mail, email, or in person if need be.
So, okay, I'm glad you talked a little bit about business because I have a list of questions. All our questions today are primarily going to be about business in the city of Franklin. So my first question is, what is the status on the proposal to replace City Hall? Is that a priority to you?
I have seen it on the list of capital improvement projects. I wouldn't say at this point, and of course I'm coming in as, I'm not an alderman currently, so I know some of the talk that's been done. It would be of importance to me. I actually do have people ask me, why don't we have a decent city hall? I mean, people think that building is totally outdated. When I moved here in 1976, that was the mall, believe it or not. Sears was at one end, Castronauts, which was a department store, was at the other end, and I was working at the bank next door, which was Harpeth National Bank, which is now First Tennessee Bank. So it would be of importance. I don't know that I would move it to the top number one slot.
Okay. Paid parking spaces recently became a reality on some private property in downtown Franklin. Should the city get in on paid parking or metering?
There again, that's another question of concern. I realize, because I am downtown a lot, and I realize it's hard to get into either one of the parking garages, sometimes to park on the street. I know that people think we've never done it that way. We've never had paid parking. I'm thinking that we need to look at it. We need to try it. We are trying it. If it works, it works. I don't know about the city getting in on paying those parking spots or not, because when you go to other towns, they have paid parking too. Mm-hmm. It's new for us, but it's out there. So.
Williamson County and Middle Tennessee in general has been a hotbed of economic growth for a number of years. What is it that this area has naturally or policy-wise that makes it different than other parts of the state?
Again, another very interesting question. Being a real estate salesperson, and I have said this before, I'm not on the real estate development side. I don't work with any developers. I strictly work on, helping people sell their house and relocate to another house, or helping people relocate from out of town. When they come here, this is one of the questions they ask. Why are houses so expensive here? What is so desirable about Williamson County? One of the things that's very desirable, and one of the things that's a huge asset, are our schools. And even though schools do not come under the jurisdiction of the Board of Mayor and Alderman, I think we need to do public-private partnerships to maintain that school system. People don't like to talk about raising taxes. That's not a popular issue. And it may be time to step up and work with corporations and public and private partnerships to maintain that we do still have those schools, because the schools are one of the main draws to this area. I am told by the Chamber of Commerce and other people that as companies look here, it's of concern to them that we don't have a diversity of housing prices, because housing. I think that the average price or median price of a house last week was $491,000 in Williamson County, and that's pretty expensive. So yeah, so I think the schools are the biggest draw to the area.
So what you just said about affordable housing draws into my next question. Some people call it affordable housing. Some say workforce housing. On a chamber trip to Colorado recently, the local delegation was introduced to attainable housing. Do you believe this is an issue? And if so, is there a public role to be played in solving it?
I heard this. I'm on the board of Franklin tomorrow, and I heard the term attainable housing yesterday for the first time. We heard a report from that Colorado trip. I have heard affordable, I've heard workforce, and I've heard attainable. Here again, with my expertise and background in housing, I know that it's very difficult to have affordable or attainable housing, as they're now calling it, because it's hard to put a number out there. What's affordable to one person or attainable to one person, another person are not across the board. So it's hard to do that. Here again, being on the Housing Commission, one of the things that we're looking at, and the Housing Commission has been around probably about 30 years, they've looked at all different kinds of ways to do the housing, and now the thing that we're looking at is similar to Friends of Franklin Parks, having Friends of Housing in Franklin, and having a 501c3. It's very much in the infant stages, has not been done, but it's been talked about. And in doing that, people will be able to make contributions to that, and then take those contributions, find a builder or a developer that we can help take some of those contributions to pay the impact fees, things like that, and then a builder that will, build an attainable house. Again, it goes back to public and private partnerships. I don't think the government can step in, the city government or any government can step in and say to somebody, you can't sell your house for everything that you want to get out of it. I don't think you can put a price tag on whatever you're going to sell your house for, because that's just reality. That's just the way it is.
Now, last night at the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting, the city discussed leasing a 54-acre parcel of land, and the options were a Discovery Center, golf course, or for affordable housing with the Housing Commission. And they voted 6-1 to lease it to the golf course. What did you think of that decision?
Being on the Housing Commission, I would have liked to have seen the affordable, attainable workforce housing be a part of that mix. I understand when they looked at the three different entities that golf was going to be the one that they chose. But last night I was encouraged because there were several aldermen that said, let's don't forget the other two. Let's keep going forward. The Hill, which is in Franklin, it's beside Sonic, and it's where there's some surplus buildings up there. The Hill has been discussed before, either for parking or for attainable workforce housing. So that's going to come back on the table. That's a possibility for housing. And then also I heard discussed that they would look for a spot for the Discovery Center. visited both the Discovery Center and the golf course, and I was pleased with both of them. But yeah, I would have leaned more towards the housing last night.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about corporate welfare. Has this area come to depend on corporate incentives too much for relocation or expansion?
In my opinion, no. I think corporations are continuing to look here. As I alluded to earlier, though, it's interesting because when you talk about corporate and stuff like that, I recently had a campaign event, and the person who catered my campaign event told at my event there are presently about 500 service jobs in Cool Springs that they cannot find people to work those jobs. And he believed it to be because of the fact that there's no place for them to live. They can't afford to live here. They're not going to come from other, communities where, if you're working in a restaurant that's a chain restaurant, you can do that in another community as well as you can do it coming to Cool Springs. And I do know that it's a concern when we look at those incentives for corporations to come here. It's a concern to them that their administrative staff be able to live here. So I think those things are going to have a bearing going forth on corporations wanting to come here if there's not a balance of the housing mix.
So do you think that we're offering too much or too little in terms of corporate incentives?
I don't think we're offering, based on what I know about that, and I've talked, with BOMA, we offer incentives to attract businesses here. And I think what we're offering is good. And then after a certain period of time, then that business will be a healthy contributor to the community. People kind of think, well, a big company comes and they gave them these incentives and they're not paying their way. But after several years, it totally levels itself out and they do become a big contributor. And there's been several companies that I could mention, I won't, but that I could mention that have strictly given graciously back to this community, both in income and revenue and in just supporting all of the activities there in the community. Corporations that come here, I think, are gracious when it comes to events like festivals and things like that and sponsoring those events. So I think even though it feels like maybe they get incentives, they're glad to give back to the community as well. I think right now it's probably where it needs to be.
Much of the infrastructure in Cool Springs was done in conjunction with developers who were required to contribute to support their contribution to traffic volume. How do you feel about this? Is it fair? Should it continue? Are you concerned that it could discourage economic development?
Interesting question. I think the contribution should continue. I don't know that it would discourage economic development. I think if corporations are coming here and they're contributing, that they're bringing a lot of business and a lot of volume here, yes, that they should contribute.
How can we protect green spaces while upholding private property rights?
We just one of the things that Franklin has in place is Envision Franklin, and it's a well thought out document. I have seen the document. I've been in several meetings where it's been presented. It's been presented to the Housing Commission. We need to be really, really conscious going forth that we obey. I started to say obey, but we follow that document. It talks about connectivity. It talks about bike trails. It talks about green space. It talks about all those things. I think green space is very important. I'm an avid walker. I get out and walk every day. I enjoy having Harlansdale Farms and all the places. City Parks and Recreation has done a good job, I think, a great job of parks and recreation. And I think going forth we need to continue to do that so that we don't end up with less and less green space.
What do you think about the plans to create a multi-use trails that connect through Harlansdale Farm and a bridge over the Harpeth?
I'm very much in favor of that. I would love to have that because I walk over there. I live in Ward 1. That's not in Ward 1, but my wife and I drive over there and walk 3 or 4 times a week, and I would love to have it all connected and be able to walk that pedestrian bridge. And I believe last night at BOMA they at least talked about the working towards getting a grant for that pedestrian bridge. Mm-hmm. So that's in the works as well.
Do you think there are going to be any challenges with that project?
Challenges from residents or?
In general?
There's always challenges. So yeah, there probably will be some challenges. There will be. I went with the city of Franklin and Franklin Tomorrow to Chattanooga, and we did this several years ago, and we talked about Riverwalk, and we talked about connectivity, and we talked about trails. And you know, people always have concerns, and one of the things that I thought was interesting was people talk about, I'm scared there'll be more crime behind my house if those trails are back there. And a police officer assured us that he's never seen someone walking down one of those trails carrying a TV. He said they will pull in your driveway and your neighbors don't know who they are, and your neighbors will help them put that TV in the car, but you're not going to find people, you know, robbing and going up and down the trails. So Chattanooga says they do not have a lot of crime on the trails and all. So I think it will just enhance the city to have Riverwalk and things like that. But yeah, it'll be challenging because some people will question it.
Do you expect new urbanism like West Haven to be the dominant form of residential development in the future, or will suburban models of the past be what we see?
I would hope that we would have a balance of both. I see West Haven as being an asset, and I'm glad that we have West Haven. It's a concept that, you know, a lot of people like, but you have to also, it's a lifestyle you have to buy into. I live in McKay's Mill. I've lived there since 2004. You know, it's convenient to everything. It's convenient to Cool Springs. We have, you know, a neighborhood Publix. We have, you know, a park near us. So with what we have and with other developments that are going up and down Carruthers, if you go down South Carruthers, I think that definitely is a model that we need. And then, yeah, West Haven is a great model. Maybe West Haven, you have Berry Farms, you know, maybe those things on a smaller scale sprinkled around. And then I just think there's a balance. There's a reason to have a balance of both.
Mm-hmm. So my last question for you is that as a future alderman, possibly, if you were elected into this position, what would your priorities be in the business realm in terms of economic development, creating new businesses, job growth, housing?
I have, you know, it's interesting because it is my first time out to run for office, and I guess I was coached early on to be careful what you promise and careful what you say you're going to do. But I have pretty much made it my platform that I will represent everybody. I will, you know, and I know it's I've heard other candidates say they won't, but to me, when you become an alderman, you agree to serve the ward. These are wards we're talking about. So I agree to serve Ward 1, which means the residents that live in residential, the commercial development, the businesses, the new businesses coming to town, all of that, you know, is part of being a Ward 1 alderman. Plus also you agree to represent the city of Franklin. So I mean, yes, I would support whatever it takes to have new businesses and to support those businesses and to, you know, to encourage, you know, wherever I can, you know, to work with the chamber and other organizations as they bring new businesses into town.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jay Edward, for being here with us today. This is Brooke Wanser for the Franklin homepage, and we're bringing you alderman candidate interviews for the 2017 election.